simple trip can end up as something macabre, if the destination is the right one. Who knows? Perhaps everything that has to happen is already determined. May your next trip, maybe to a nearby place, maybe on that weekend getaway, lead you to encounter something that will change your life forever. Something that will demonstrate the existence of the paranormal in a second. Something that will make you the next protagonist of tales of the night. Hello Uriel. Hello to the Tales of the Night community. I greet you from Colombia. To be more specific, from the north. I'm telling you this, but I would prefer to remain anonymous for reasons that I will explain later. My story may not be one of terror or as macabre as stories usually shared here, but it is certainly something that still disturbs me after 9 years. It began in 2014, when I was 14 years old. My family and I took a trip to a small town that I had visited years before. A very small cold place, surrounded by vegetation, that made you feel like you were inside a story. However, on that occasion, we visited for a rather sad reason. We went to visit a friend of my father's who was very ill. We would stay with him for about a month, there at his house, as it was a huge place with many rooms that I didn't explore for some reason. I suppose I was still at the age of playing, and in the first few days on the street, I made several friends with whom I spent most of my time. We would go down to the town park to play or up to the mountains in search of mango trees. One of the boys, Juan, was the most withdrawn of the group. Too serious, quiet, and with a way of looking at me that sometimes made me uncomfortable. Sometimes he would just stare at me very intently, almost without blinking. The others told me that's how he was, that he was the weirdo of the group, and I tried not to pay much attention to those behaviors. However, in the third week of our stay in the town, Juan invited me to his house for lunch. With some nervousness, I accepted. And what happened, what occurred, I don't know how to take it, with surprise, terror, or fascination. You all can judge. Juan's house was only 2 blocks away from the park where I spent time with the boys. It wasn't far from the house of my father's friend. I asked for permission and was allowed to go, and when I arrived, Juan was already waiting for me. From inside the house came a delicious smell of chicharrón. Juan's mother was very kind to me, very attentive, and there in his house, Juan was a completely different boy. He was more smiley, talked a lot, and was quite funny. Near where I was, there was a room where I noticed someone who didn't come out. The door was open. As we were getting ready to eat, Juan went in there and came out with someone in a wheelchair, a very elderly woman, whom he introduced as his grandmother. I greeted her, but the woman didn't respond. She froze. Her eyes started to water in silence. I thought maybe she couldn't see well, or couldn't speak, and I felt sorry thinking that it was better for me to eat in silence without insisting on greeting her. The woman didn't take her eyes off me while we ate. I thought her presence made her uncomfortable. When we finally finished, the woman signaled to Juan. He approached and said something in her ear. Juan went into the room where he came out of and came back with a photo album. The woman, with a gesture, asked me to come to her side. She could barely speak with a soft, very low voice. She started showing me the photos. She described who appeared in them, her family, her mother, her brothers and sisters. Everything seemed normal until we got to that photo. The photo of a young woman identical to me. I want you to understand, it wasn't a girl who looked like me. We weren't like sisters. The person there was me. The old woman kept showing me more photos, and I kept recognizing every stage of my life, from baby to adolescence. They seemed like photos of me that I had never seen before, although they were evidently very old. I couldn't speak. The words didn't come out to ask what it was about until the woman told me who the girl in the photos was, and I thought it couldn't get worse. She told me that girl, the young woman in the photographs, was her younger sister, who died when she was only 15 years old. One night, a violent storm attacked that town. They lived on the outskirts, very close to the riverbank. The wind blew so hard that it swept away the roof of the little house where they lived. She and her younger siblings had to get out of there to seek refuge in a neighbor's house. In the midst of lightning, storm, and chaos, they all ran out of the house. Everyone except that young woman, who unfortunately had been trapped under a very heavy wooden beam that had fallen from the roof. By the time the other siblings realized she was missing, the rising river hit the house, sweeping it away completely. They all ran to look for her. They didn't stop searching for hours, for days, weeks. In their hearts, they held the hope that somehow their sister had survived. That hope ended when the police informed them that they had found a body, trapped among debris several kilometers away, among all the destruction that the river had carried away. The corpse was unrecognizable. It had gone through a lot of violence and was already decomposing. But the clothing made them know it was her, their little sister. The grandmother told me that she couldn't see her sister. They wouldn't let her. The coffin in which she was buried was completely sealed so that no one could see her like that. The grandmother, telling me with tears in her eyes, suddenly changed the way she spoke to me. She told me she was happy to be able to see me again, that she was happy that I had been able to return to the town. She took my hand tightly and asked for forgiveness for having run away, for having left me behind. I wasn't moved. I was too disturbed by the story, by the photos. Did I exist before? In a past life, had I died there? In that town where I had always felt at home? Or was it all a macabre joke? How could I see those photos? Evidently mine, but so old. I couldn't stay any longer. I needed to get out of there. I said goodbye, and the woman remained there, smiling as she watched me leave. It was very difficult for me to sleep the following nights, to think. I no longer wanted to go out and play that last week. I just wanted to go back home, forget what had happened, forget that I now knew that I had lived before, that I had already died. The day we left the town, Juan was at the park with the boys. I said goodbye with a shout from afar from the car. We left with the promise of returning, but that never happened. Violence eventually isolated that town, from which many fled, including Juan. I learned about this because in college, I met one of those boys from the town who still remembered me. He told me how armed men killed police officers, civilians, and took away children. Juan and his mother were among the first to leave the town, and nothing more was heard from them. Sometimes I think about going back. Maybe the old woman no longer exists, but what I do know is still there. It's that tomb of her sister, the tomb in which, apparently, I'm buried. Has a horror story night ever turned into the night when you live your own experience, when you go through something without any explanation, an encounter that will stay with you for the rest of your lives? That's what happened to me and my cousin, who has told me that I can tell the story, but she prefers to remain anonymous. I started listening to this program a year ago when a friend recommended it to me, and I think it happened to me like many others, that after listening to so many stories, I gained confidence to finally share mine, without the same fear as before of feeling judged, of being thought of as crazy. I'm from a Spanish island called Tenerife, a beautiful place, worth getting to know every corner. And at that time, when I was 10 years old, my parents were friends with several families with whom we would often get together, and with whom they decided to take a trip to the northern part of the island, to a rural area that I had not yet visited, wooded and completely secluded. For that reason, I wasn't very excited to take that trip. Although I love the forest, I'm very afraid of the dark, and if there was anything at night, it was a more intense seclusion than what you would find in any city. However, my parents encouraged me. My cousin would also be going, and their friends' children were my age, and I got along with them very well. And well, When we approached the place where we would be staying, I left all fears behind. That forest was beautiful. When we arrived, we saw the other attendees who had arrived before us, unloading things from the cars to take them into the cabin. Among them were my uncles, so I ran down to look for my cousin. We loved doing things together. While the adults chatted and unpacked, the children decided to play hide and seek. The place lent itself to it. Plus, we could explore some of the surroundings. But perhaps because it was getting dark, I couldn't help but feel that whenever I hid far from the cabin, something was watching us in the forest. When it got dark, we went inside to play board games that we found there. The adults socialized with some drinks at the dining table. Then we tried to connect the TV we had found. But Gabriel, one of my parents' friends, told us to take advantage of the setting. Why not, instead of watching TV, tell ghost stories? It seemed like the best idea to me. The forest, the darkness, as I said, scared me. Plus, there were very young children, and I didn't think it was appropriate for them to listen. But everyone wanted to do it, so I had to put up with it. Gabriel started by telling us a story that didn't scare anyone, and we all booed him. And he left to let the children tell stories. My cousin told a legend about a witch that didn't scare us either, and we started challenging each other to see if we could really manage to tell something that would scare us, that would truly terrify us. The stories kept getting stronger and more terrifying, and when it was almost my turn, my uncle approached us. He told us that he had a very good story, but he didn't know if we were willing to listen, because it was about a legend that inhabited these forests, where, according to people from nearby places, the supernatural was always present, always close. Perhaps he dared to tell it because he was a bit tipsy, but that legend finally scared us. It really scared us. I remember he ended up asking us to be very careful when walking through the forest. And although we had been playing, joking about what we would do to the first one who got scared, to the first one who wanted to go to sleep. At that moment, we were all so scared that we preferred to do something else. We simply stopped telling stories and entertained ourselves doing other things. Until around midnight, they sent us to bed. All the children shared a room with several bunk beds. There were 8 of us, so there were some fights over who would get which bed. After a while of arguing, the adults ordered us to turn off the light and try to sleep. It was late, and we would be leaving early the next day to hike through the forest. I feel like it took us a while to fall asleep. Only the youngest seemed to forget the stories that had been told a while before. Little by little, I even started to hear some snoring, making me realize that I was the only one still awake. I felt alone. I thought I heard something at the window. But I didn't even try to look over there. I thought it was the wind. But then it got louder, and I realized that it was definitely a real sound that was increasing in intensity. It sounded like someone was knocking on our window. I tried to ignore it, hoping it would go away on its own. And that's what happened. It stopped. But before I could fall asleep, it came back. This time I heard something scratching at the window. My bunk bed was facing the opposite direction and directly toward the wall, so I couldn't see from there what was causing that noise. I didn't dare move. I wanted to turn around to see what it was, but at the same time I felt that it was better not to see. Something scratched the window for several minutes, as if it wanted to get attention, as if it wanted me to look, to get up and see. My instinct told me not to stay still. When it finally stopped making noise, I breathed a sigh of relief. I thought that whatever it was that was out there had gotten tired and left. Or even that it was just my fear, my suggestion from the stories we told. Yes, surely that was it. My mind mixing an incipient dream with the reality I saw around me. That, of course. And the best way to prove it to myself was to get up, go and look out the window, confirmed that there was no reason to be afraid. I got up. My cousin sat up in bed, surprised that I was also awake.
Julia, you heard it too?
I nodded, and all the fear came back at once. I wasn't imagining it. My cousin had heard it too. I wanted to calm her by telling her that it was probably a tree branch, but she reminded me that there were no trees near the house, not a single branch that could make a sound like that. I told her I would go and take a look, to see if I saw anything, that she should wait for me. But she got up and told me she wanted to see too. We got to the window and didn't see anything. Just darkness, or so we thought. My cousin suddenly stifled a scream and pointed me towards some kind of ditch that surrounded the cabin's grounds. It took me a moment to recognize what I was seeing, to find its shape. It looked like a smile in the darkness, a smile and very wide open eyes. As my eyes adapted to the darkness, I could see that it was a figure crouched on the floor, hidden, but as soon as it noticed that we were watching, it jumped up. I think I have never felt, nor will I ever feel more afraid than at that moment. We couldn't quite recognize its shape, but it didn't seem human, despite the smile. My cousin ran to a corner of the room. We didn't know what to do, whether to wake everyone up causing panic, or leave them and run up to warn the adults. But their room was far away. We were afraid to go out to get there. Plus, I had seen that they left a window in the living room open. The door probably wasn't locked. Going out was too dangerous if that thing decided to come in. I hugged my cousin and felt her trembling. I realized that I was trembling too. My cousin started to pray, and I prayed with her there in the corner of the room. We felt it was the only way to protect ourselves, that it would drive away whatever was out there. But we noticed something approaching the window. It was that. We saw them up close. I screamed. It was a black silhouette in a human-like shape, but the only thing you could see was its smile, and its eyes opening wider and wider, as if they were about to pop out. It started scratching the window. My cousin began to pray out loud again. She closed her eyes so she wouldn't see that thing, squeezing them shut. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Something made me unable to look away. It wouldn't stop scratching. My cousin kept squeezing me without stopping her prayers, louder and louder, crying, asking God not to let that thing in. Whatever was at the window laughed. Its voice sounded distorted, as if it were human, but as if it were the laughter of hundreds. I still don't understand how I didn't faint, how I didn't run out of there, screaming. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe a few seconds, which for me were 10 minutes, until that thing left. My cousin and I lay together until sleep overcame us, almost at dawn. When we woke up, we told my parents, my uncles, the adults, but no one believed us. They laughed and said, "That's what happened when you tell scary stories before bed." My cousin and I couldn't go back into that room. We slept with our parents for the rest of the weekend. When we've talked about it, my cousin has a slightly different memory than I do. She never managed to see the creature well, and when it approached, she couldn't open her eyes. She doesn't remember that smile that, unfortunately, I do. We congratulate you for still being here, although you haven't survived this episode yet. But we continue because we have one more story tonight. Hello, community. My name is Noemi Gonzalez. I live on a ranch that may be little known to most of you, San Cristobal, El Cerrito. My brother works at a food distribution center, and his boss always sends him on trips to load trucks with merchandise from Michoacan or some other parts of our state. What I'm about to tell you, exactly as he shared it with me, happened to him on one of those trips. And you see, on December 2nd, We celebrated my 19-year-old nephew's birthday, and after a while we ended up telling ghost stories. My brother told us this, and I asked him to write it down so I could share it with the community. This is his account. This happened to me in one of those times when they sent me to Michoacan. Hours passed on the road, and I started to feel tired. It was already early morning, and I felt like I was falling asleep several times, so I paid attention to look for a place to rest. Shortly after, I managed to see a roadside diner, one of those small wooden and cardboard constructions they put alongside the highway. That's where truck drivers can eat something or have a strong coffee to wake up. It looked open. I thought it would be good to stop there. Parked in the distance, I thought I saw the silhouettes of 2 trucks, surely with the drivers inside the diner or sleeping in them. I parked and went in. There was only a very thin woman cleaning the dusty tables. I didn't pay much attention to her. I just ordered a coffee at the counter from a young man who gave it to me without even saying good evening. I sat at a table facing outside, while out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the woman was still cleaning. A van arrived silently and parked in front of the diner. No one got out, and no one could be seen inside. I thought it was someone going to rest, but no, it was just there in front of us, and it gave me a bad feeling. I got up, thinking I was awake enough to keep going. And now I could see the woman clearly. She was facing me. Her face had an almost cadaverous appearance, extremely thin. Her eyes looked very black, sunken in, as was her skin. That made me almost run out of there. The 2 trailers I thought I had seen when I arrived were no longer there, nor was the van I had just seen. The strangest thing is that no engine noise was heard. It was as if they had never been there. I quickly got into my truck and took off. I didn't stop until I arrived. When I got there, I told one of the staff who was loading the truck, and what he responded left me with goosebumps.
No way, dude. You really went into that diner?
I'm telling you, I was already tired and got there to have a coffee, to get rid of the sleepiness I had, I said.
No, it can't be. That place has been closed for over 5 years. After a shootout, where they kicked out the poor people who were there, the place has been closed ever since.
I couldn't believe it. Where did the coffee I had drunk come from then? I was left wondering. On the way back home, I looked at the place. I swear to you it was closed. I stopped to take a good look. The doors even had padlocks, and it looked like an abandoned place, simply abandoned for years. Now, whenever they send me on a trip and I have to pass by there, I can't even look. You never know if I'll see it open again.